I'm Jenny Robertson, founder of the On Purpose Woman Global Community and founder and publisher of On Purpose Woman magazine. I'm here to share the speaker portion of our Connections Over Coffee gathering of the On Purpose Woman Global Community. Lisa Diane McCall speaks on When Nothing Feels Normal, Acknowledging Grief in Unprecedented Times. Lisa Diane McCall of Creative Choices Coaching is a certified life coach and grief educator. She holds a safe space for clients to navigate grief and life transitions, to discover creative tools, coping skills, and new perspectives that release limiting beliefs. By learning what holds them back, clients begin to trust their decisions, feel more balanced, and live a healthier lifestyle. Go to creativechoicescoaching.com to schedule a free half-hour Explore the Possibilities call. So Lisa, thank you for being here, and you are on.
Okay. Yes, thank you, everyone. I'm pleased to be talking about grief. That sounds weird, but I think it's a topic we tend not to talk about. So I'm going to share my screen and we can get started. Talking about how we're sort of in a place where for reasons of the pandemic and many other things, unfortunately, we're sort of in a place of nothing feeling normal. And by normal, I don't know that we really want to say that there's normal in the world, but I think it's more about familiarity. You know, we have to have some sense of normalcy in our life, which means familiarity, things that we can hang our hat on. And given the impact of the pandemic, you know, we've sort of got a little off kilter with that. And when we get off kilter and we have things that challenge us, and we don't seem to be able to have much time to adjust to them as things keep kind of getting a little bit more out of kilter, you know, that's transitions and that's loss. And that's actually that sense of grief. There is sadness in our psyche, probably, that we're not even really understanding or knowing to even label it that. We oftentimes think grief has to be something large and personal, but we've just sort of have been dealing with something that's even on a global level. So even on our own personal level, we've placed on top of that so many things that unprecedented losses and that have gone globally. So it's important to acknowledge grief, and these are unprecedented times that we're in. And think about the stressors, and we've had little to no time to adjust to them. So we've had complicated, things that have complicated life. There may be some traumatic things that have come up, and just collective grieving. So there's a lot of that I think we are sharing in. So in those losses from the pandemic, I have used this in other presentations, this schematic of how many different ways that we have experienced loss during the pandemic. And, you know, it has gone anywhere from potentially having the death of loved ones, whether they're family or friends, or even the loss of health because we've had a case of COVID or maybe multiple cases of COVID. So these are kind of, you know, very impactful things, but there's even things that we may not have had to that depth that the pandemic has brought to us. You know, losses of our routine and predictability, as I'm saying, where's that normalcy that we were once hanging our hat on? Loss of events. We were just talking about someone in our group who had to, you know, postpone her wedding to the point that she's not really even had that wedding. You know, there's proms and, you know, graduations. Those are in point time periods that there isn't recapturing it. There isn't a rescheduling of it. And those things can really play on us. You know, loss of endings. People who died did not even get a chance. We didn't get a chance to have the usual places of mourning and communal, you know, of times to get together and be with that. So there's been a lot of things. And in the fact that we're living in a death phobic and grief illiterate society, we already were rarely allowing ourselves to think or even talk about death. And we oftentimes don't even know how to recognize or acknowledge our grief. So, you know, we bring that to then this impact of the pandemic. And that impact is somewhat, you know, it's kind of breaking, you know, apart. We're starting to, you know, come out. And there's even, how do I readjust? You know, what is that sense of readjustment, right? So there's a lot of things that we've been carrying. So I'm just going to say that we've probably hit fatigue with all of this. Even fatigue, right, is a sense of, grief. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I'm worn out from this. But in those prolonged pandemic conditions, we have a whole slew of other things that we've been having to navigate. Shootings, from mass shootings to individual shootings. We hear that on such a daily basis, whether it's social media or in the news. We're dealing with all of the supply chain and all the things that have been impacted. Not to mention, I still went to the grocery store recently and there was empty space for the cat food, empty space still in the last week. And then rising prices, right? These are stressors. These are small. We're talking about, well, they're just small stressors, but we have multiples of these in our life. Not to mention the overarching political climate, our climate impact. Look at what horrendous things have happened with the hurricanes that have just recently come through. And these are things that we're registering. They may not impact us directly, but we're registering them. And it's kind of forcing us to normalize to nothing that feels normal. So what I want to make sure is saying is that, we're really in a lot of uncertainty. Life has always been uncertain, but this is sort of even more, it's more in our focus, and it brings a lot to handle. So with that, we really need to say to each other, it's okay if I'm not okay. It's okay if there's little things inside of us that don't feel quite right, little sadnesses. And not to diminish them, to say, that really is a sense of what is going on for me right now. And as I posed the question, how can you be kind to yourself today? To be kind and gentle with yourself in this environment and with yourself. So with that, if anybody wants to share, how have you felt impacted? What are some things, just briefly, if there's anybody who would like to share about what you may have felt impacted by what we've been going through, especially with the pandemic. Anybody want to share?
I'm just exhausted. I just feel like it's constant exhaustion. And unfortunately, because of, how social media gives you kind of that instant gratification, you kind of self-perpetuate the overwhelm by looking at the headlines and watching the news and, oh my God, another shooting. Oh my God, all these things. So it's just exhausting.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm saying. It may not be something that is as impactful as a direct hit in your individual life, but there's all of this environment around us that we're soaking in and taking in this news. And it is oftentimes, doom and gloom. And we even in the acute phase of the pandemic, watching the news with, the number of people who are dying and the bodies and the, frontline workers who were just, again, we were talking about exhaustion. That was just hard to take in. Our system is overloaded with that. So yeah, thank you for sharing. We are, I think, in that fatigue and that exhaustion. And if we think about the idea and acknowledging the sense that there's grief, we're, again, not in the best of place in this society in acknowledging it, much less recognizing and feeling it. So what do we do when there's grief? Well, we end up minimizing it, and helping a person with platitudes, well, you'll heal in time. Well, they're in a better place now if you've lost a loved one. Well, maybe the person who lost the person, who's mourning that person can say they're in a better place. But oftentimes it's not our place to say that person is in a better place, right? It's not for us to judge. And what does our society do? Buck up, let's be strong. It could be worse. It diminishes, we're diminishing the impact of a death or transitions, because any type of transition can bring a sense of grief. I know exactly how you feel. That's really a hard one. No, I doubt that you really know exactly how another person feels. So, what can you do to ask them? How do you feel, right? It's better to be more in an open question to a person who is feeling grief. Isn't it time you got over this? Again, diminishing and trying to, it's about our own discomfort with grief when we say these platitudes or these certain phrases. If you're in discomfort, you tend not to want to be getting involved with another person's pain. So you say, well, it's been a year. Why don't you start dating if someone has lost their husband? Is that really helpful? Is that really where the person is? That's what you need to find out. And I know we like to think that everything happens for a reason, but you know what? Death just happens. We are all going to experience death. If there's a way of finding meaning from it, that's wonderful. But to assign reason, to and especially say to a person, everything happens for a reason, really not going to be a helpful way of supporting somebody in grief. So what does grief look like? I like this illustration. It is a tangled, all over the place, nonlinear, very messy experience. It's not easy. While there may be some stages of, I know Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was, known for her stages, and she never meant them to be linear or one after another. But we'll go up and down and back and forth, better, not falling back into, absolute devastation. It goes all over the place, right? So there is no exact path that you can take that you think can get through the tunnel to the end, right? So let's talk about grief. And I love just to be like the first and foremost thing we need to remember about grief is that it's as personal and as individual as your fingerprint. There are no two people who are going to follow that grief process in that tangled way, in the same way, in that picture. You don't want to be shoulding it or shouldn't it. It shouldn't be something or it should be something, right? It's how a person needs to be doing it. I like the quote that, or like the idea that true expertise in grief lies with the griever. That is the person. And it can hold so many unexpected feelings like numbness, being stuck, anger, jealousy, regret, guilt. And it wants more than anything to be witnessed. All of those things that are going on in within oneself, you want to find somebody to witness it, or more than one person to witness it, to give you a chance to express it and not use those platitudes to sort of diminish what you're feeling. I like there's another quote I like. There are three needs of the griever: to find the words for the loss, to say the words aloud, and to know that the words have been heard. And it's not about being broken or needing to be fixed. This is not a broken head. This is a broken heart. This is deep feelings that are, not to be, put under the rug or ignored. In order to go through grief, you have to feel the grief. You have to do the grieving. And you want to also be able to hold the space without fixing someone, without giving advice to someone. And that can be very difficult because that's giving a person space to be in their discomfort while you have to sit with that discomfort. And that is really exactly what anyone could probably use in a place when they're in acute grief. Now, it can be very messy, as we saw in that little scrambled picture, because it also can bring up feelings of guilt. There's old wounds, unresolved emotions. There's a lot of things that by the loss of a person or even something, let's say loss of a job, right? That can bring up all kinds of feelings if you lose a job, as well as, losing a chance to do something, right? There's a lot of things that it can trigger for us. So really be mindful of the fact that those things can come up. And just the idea that we have been going through somewhat of a traumatic time. Pandemic was unprecedented. It's not what we've ever experienced in our lifetime. Where all grief does not have trauma, all trauma has grief. So just acknowledging the fact that there is probably some grief in what we've been going through and experiencing with the pandemic and the things that we've been witnessing, even through social media and the news. So what are some ways to cope with grief? And I like the saying that it really is not about having a disorder. There is no disease. It's not a weakness. what you're feeling, all of those things that come up are not about being weak. It's really a necessary price that you pay, where, the idea that meeting grief is to meet the loss of someone or even something we love or had a deep connection with. And the only cure for grief is to grieve, right? So, so the idea that it's so important to connect with a community, that it's very unconditional, to have someone who can hold you in that space, or even just one person. That's what I do for my clients. I say, I'm holding the space for you, and you're meeting the person exactly where they are. There's also the idea of, how can you create self-care in a hard time? What are the routines? Sometimes, like if we have, just focus small and be realistic with your expectations, just getting up in the morning and getting showered and having a meal, maybe after being immobilized, because grief can definitely immobilize, to say, okay, just a small thing, whether there's small goals in any kind of routine I can establish, can help kind of work with the grief in what how it's impacting you, the pain that you're feeling. And it's really important to have distractions from the grief, not fully, but you can't just carry that pain consistently and all the time. Take some time to do the binging on a comedy show, right? How can you have some time to just take some time away from the pain, but be realistic that it's not just going to go away in a year time, sometimes not even in 2 years. Sometimes 2 years is still considered to be in early grief. So giving yourself permission to be in that space of grief for longer than you might expect. And in that, what do we oftentimes not do? We're used to being strong in ourselves and not asking for help, or even accepting help, right? Our strength and ideas of weakness say, oh, I don't need that. I can do it myself, right? I can deal with this. But it's really important to make sure you're asking for help as well as accepting it. And there's the recognizing that as a person, their love may not be with us, or let's say the death may end the relationship, the connection in a bodily way with the person, but your love continues, right? There's love there that continues, or the connection that you feel is there to continue. So you know that everyday activities will also continue. It's hard because if you lose something, it sort of throws you into a different space than the rest of the world, right? The rest of the world's still moving along, but you feel like you aren't. So taking time to be kind and gentle and allowing yourself to be maybe somewhat immobilized. I like what David Kessler, who was the person who trained me for the grief educator, take your shoes and socks off. Your toes are continuing to grow, right? There's things that are continuing on in you and with your life. And another thing that may not happen for a bit, you have to go through acute phases of grief, but eventually maybe finding meaning. And that's not finding meaning in the loss or the death, it's finding meaning in your life after loss. So what can that mean in terms of finding meaning? Well, we were just talking in our group, our small group, about gratitude. The gratitude that we have for who you knew when you knew them, in the time that you knew them. And that's difficult sometimes, because sometimes all our relationships are not easy. There may be some tension and difficulties that we had with the person. So it may be hard to find gratitude. But one of the things to do is maybe, or before I get to the commemorate, is to look within. What are the things that maybe it's bringing up with you? Like, as I said, there may be unresolved emotions and old wounds, and that is giving you the indication that maybe it's time to address those things, right? Bringing those to light now, while the person is not in my life. I can incorporate and see what I can do for myself as the impact that person had on me. There's commemorating and honoring a loved one. How can you do your own little rituals, your own little ways of commemorating? inviting people to have a remembrance, right? It brings community together. It's so important to create that community. Maybe lighting a candle. What are some ways that you can, bring that person, saying their name, right? Even saying their name, speaking out to the person, saying, talking with the person in your space of knowing that they're not there, but in some way they are there, and they're still in your heart. So commemorating them by saying their name and letting them know that, how they've impacted you and what you miss about them. The idea that there's a way of expanding that meaning and maybe expanding it out to others. Maybe your loved one had a cause or a passion in life. And you can sort of maybe become more in connection with that. And we all know that our impact has been made by interactions with many people in our lives. That's how we live life, our impacts, our interactions with others. And so that you've probably felt a change by knowing them in life, but there's also feeling changed by their death. So it's a two-way street, maybe bringing what you know about them and what they've brought to your life, and then understanding that you work with how you feel changed by their death as well. And one of the things that we all know, and death brings to the forefront, is that brevity of life, realizing, because that last breath is the last breath. And so it's a reminder to live life. I always say to live life as if death is sitting on your shoulder every day. So you live with a deeper sense of valuing the limited time we all ultimately have. Are you dwelling in a place of I'll be happy when mindset, right? When we do that, well, someday, right? I've somedayed myself a lot in some ways. And I think I reached a point, that I said, oh yeah, someday's arrived, right? I'm not dead yet, thankfully, but someday has arrived, right? And we're all talking about what can we give as gifts to the world in the time we have left. So it's really important to bring that to the forefront. And I'm going to bring it back to self-care when I asked you, what kindness can you give to yourself today? And self-care is really an important aspect of nourishing to flourish when you're in a place that's really difficult. Finding ways and knowing that when you do self-care, it doesn't mean me first. It means me too. It's including yourself. It's being in relation with yourself and knowing that it's not selfish, right? What we do to nourish ourselves is really not selfish. And one of the things I'll bring, the fact that beauty is so important. And in our little group, we had our little breakout group. We were talking about gratitudes and, just feeling the beauty that's around, seeing and connecting with the beauty that's around us. And I brought the idea that in conjunction with gratitude, there's being in a place of savoring with all your senses. What can you do to, hear the kettle, heating up the pot and smelling the tea as you're pouring it, and then feeling the nice, luscious flavor of that tea as it goes down. It may be a beautiful mug that you pick so that you have this beautiful mug, right? So, or you're walking down the street, there's so much blooming and there's so much, today it isn't bright in my area, but bright blue skies. And maybe you even like cloudy skies. What can you take in that you can really feel and sense, right, as a savoring of life? And I always say, play music, dance, sing, right? When I am making my dinner, I have my Pandora stations and I am singing along, and then one just makes me want to break out and dance, right? So doing things that connect us with those things of joy. We don't play a lot when we're adults. Feeling those things that help us to play. Little rituals, once a month with a little ritual you can do as self-care. And not taking oneself so seriously, right? Laughing at yourself. When can you actually laugh at yourself? And in that place of feeling a little more light and laughing, how do you flirt with the world? And flirting meaning How can you create deeper or even surface interactions? As you walk down the street, can you provide a smile? Can you have a smile that connects with someone? Do you see a smile on someone and do you respond with a smile, right? That's that flirtation, just bringing up something, just saying something. I've had some conversations with people that if I hadn't spoken, if I hadn't said something to somebody, it wouldn't have created that spark of connection in that moment. And it helps us feel better if we feel we're connected in our lives, right? It helps us feel that death is something we all share. So be in connection in life really enhances connections. So in conclusion, it really is imperative to acknowledge that we all may on some level be carrying grief. It came from probably before, throughout some part of our lives before the pandemic happened. The pandemic has stirred us up in ways. And so to also understand that bearing witness is an intervention. That is hard sometimes to do because you're holding something that has discomfort. It's not easy, but bearing witness, asking, how are you feeling? Where are you? How are you doing today is so important when we're feeling grief. And it's going to help us all in some way to navigate these unprecedented times. So thank you for, hopefully I've given some little pearls of wisdom and little assurances or reassurances to do things for yourself, to be in connection with yourself and with the world in ways that can support you and help you feel you're living life in this place of knowing that it's not going to be there for always. So thank you. And I'm actually holding, I'm starting to hold death cafes. I'm going to be in the Baltimore area in Hamden. I'm going to be holding a death cafe Friday, which I think is tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock in Hamden. So I can give you the connection to that if you're anywhere. Yeah, Jesse's going to be part of that. I would like to join me in that. I'm going to have them at different areas, and I will also have them, I will say, I'm going to be planning with Maria to have them at her store in Rosedale, Maryland. So now that we're kind of coming out of the pandemic, I'm going to try to start, having gatherings so we can be in that place of talking our thoughts and beliefs and concerns and fears about life, about death. And being in life as we do them, as we allow ourselves to do that. So thank you. And if anybody knows anybody who might be in a place of grief or in grief yourself, I am certified as a grief educator, and you can talk with, kind of connect with me through my website here, www.creativechoices.com. I have a free half-hour get to know and explore the possibilities session. And you can also email me at ldmccall@msn.com. Okay.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
I want everyone to unmute yourself so we can applaud Lisa and she can hear it and get a little bit of recognition from us. So
Yay! Beautiful.
beautiful.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
And thank you, Lisa, for not just your beautiful words, but the wisdom and the way that you delivered it was just so meaningful to me. And I know that everyone, I believe everyone here got some nugget that we can walk away
I hope so.
and help us with that. So I want to tell everyone, anyone who's watching this live or the replay, if you'd like to join us for one of our 11 free Zoom gatherings a month or an in-person in Richmond or Charlottesville, Virginia, comment below, or you can go to our website, opwgc.com, and check out our calendar. Lisa also has a great article in the September-October issue of On Purpose Woman magazine that you can also see on my website, and it is about how it's okay to not be okay. So thanks everyone for watching.